Hello and welcome to another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And our next guest, Niamh McAnally, has done that in spades. Oh my goodness, she is an interesting lady, and she is definitely living an epic life, and she has thought her way there, and she's going to share with us how. She is the writer on the water, and she's written 2 books now. I've read one of the 2, and the other one I can't wait to read because she is so engaging. You will really enjoy meeting her, and she's got some great life lessons for us. And one of her main things that she left me with was you have to manage that internal chatter. So let's get started. So Niamh, my goodness, I'm excited about this. I feel like I know you already from reading your book. So tell me a little bit about your beginnings. Where did all of this story of Niamh begin?
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's lovely to meet you and to talk with you. So Niamh is my name. It's Niamh, and it's a Gaelic name because I grew up in Ireland. And I was growing up in a theatrical family. Both my parents were actors. And one of the things that instilled in me very early on is that the one thing we can guarantee is change. Because they would get cast in a theatre show and they would never know whether it was like for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, where the next job was coming from. So no matter what happened to me in my life, I've had to reinvent myself about 5 different times across 5 different careers. But that mindset of, okay, this is your situation, what's next? And so I like I said, I grew up in Ireland, and one winter, I think I was about 12, they took me on an overseas holiday to Spain. And that was my first time outside of Ireland. And I couldn't understand that in winter, there was countries where the sun shone in the middle of February. And I was like, wait a minute. People have been holding out on me because like in the winter in Ireland, it's, we're at 53 to 54 degrees latitude. So, it's very short days in the winter time. It gets dark about 4:30 and the cloud cover and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, as soon as I'm old enough to leave home, I'm going to get myself an atlas for my birthday, and I'm going to start traveling to all these warm places.
That is so cool that at such a young age, you knew that you needed to chase the sun. You knew it. Do you feel like you had the SAD?
The seasonal affective disorder. Do you know, it's funny, I didn't learn about that until years and years later. But what I did know in that moment was, and there's 3 colors that really sing to me. And one is the aqua blue color of a pool, the green trees, and then that deep blue sky. And that's when I first experienced it that night in Spain, the daytime. And ever since, it doesn't matter what mood I'm in, I can go see those 3 colors and I just like lift it up in joy. And I hadn't heard of seasonal affective disorder, but I guess if I was to be diagnosed, I'd say I definitely have it, because I kind of feel a bit depressed or sad, literally, in that cloud. Based in Florida at the moment, which is fine. We get cloudy days, like full on clouds, but I know it's transient. I know it's not in for months at a time. And even, if we have it for a few days, I'm so happy to see the blue sky again.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So you grew up in Ireland. Mom and Dad were both actors. Dad was a serious actor, and Mom could have been, but she chose not to. Why?
Well, my dad would go away to different locations for his movies. And one of the times he was gone for about 18 months down to Libya when they were shooting Billy Budd. And my mother had an option to be on stage in Broadway. And this was a little news clipping I found. I think I was about 9 when I found it. And it said Ronnie Masterson turns down a gig on Broadway to look after her 2 young daughters. And I remember thinking, they both could have gone the full length, in terms of stardom, etc. And my mother chose that at that stage she had a young family to, raise. And so she kind of took a back step a little bit. And not to say, like, right up until before she died, she was still working. I mean, she was in her 80s and she was playing roles on television.
Wow. And that impacted you pretty intensely, that she could be so selfless.
Yeah, I was I was very taken by that. And I remember at the time going and giving her a big old hug and saying thank you. She goes, what was that for? And I said, I'll tell you when I'm 20, because I didn't want to be caught for snooping in her dressing table, because that's where I found the clipping, right? And it did infect me. And so much so, years later, I became a television director. And at one point, before I went on this TV course to become a TV multi-camera director, I went to my dad saying, I'm not sure if I should do this. And he said, well, why? And I said, well, because I don't know if this is the day I'm going to look back on and say, I chose career over marriage and a family. My dad was so good at critical thinking. He turns around to me and says, let me see if I understand this correctly. You've been given this opportunity to go on the TV director course. And that's what's on the table. I went, yes. And then he goes, now, I haven't exactly seen anybody come knock on my door asking for your hand in marriage. Now, have I? And I went, no. He says, so what is your problem? There's no dilemma here. Take the next gig, which is part of his makeup. He's always like, take the next job, make sure you keep the money rolling in and do what needs to be done next.
My goodness, what an incredible role model that you had in both of them. In both of them. What wow. Okay, so the story is, guys, I'm telling you, you need to get the book. The book comes out. It's right behind her there. Flares Up. You can see it.
Oh, it flares up. And the new one coming out is Following Sunshine.
Following the Sunshine. And sorry about that. Yes. Sorry about that. So the Flares Up book is about two men who were 40, 55 and 65.
Yes.
And got in a wooden boat and crossed the Atlantic.
Right. So they rowed across the Atlantic. Now, if we spool forward a little bit in my story, I was living on a sailboat at the time in Antigua when I saw them come ashore. And myself and my husband went out to the mouth of the harbour to welcome them in. And I took this iconic photograph of them as they lit their handheld flares and held them up. It was kind of their Olympic podium moment, if you like. And after that ceremony, when they landed ashore, we invited them onto our sailboat for their first home-cooked meal. And they started telling me about their story, and I was fascinated, and they learned that I was a writer. And I said, I'm interested in writing your story on one condition. It can't be about how to row across an ocean, because that's like, one chapter. I got in a boat and I went rowed and rowed and rowed for like a long time, and then I got there. But I said to them, if you will dig deep emotionally, spiritually, psychologically as to why you did it, how it affected your families, and how the experience changed you as human beings, I said, that's the story. And that's what we did. And so I spent about 1.5 years working on that, and back and forth with Zoom calls and interviews, etc. And then finally that book came out in 2022. Now, meanwhile, the story of my life, which is in Following Sunshine, I had started to write that back in 2016. And I put it aside during that period while I was writing Flares Up. And now it's back out, and it's coming out in September now. So it's a long period of time from first line to publish.
Well, I think that most people's never gets to that point. And everyone has books in them. Everyone has a story. Right. And so why are you different? Why did you follow through and get to this point?
One of the things for me was, especially with Following Sunshine, is I wanted to tell the story, or rather use my story as framework to share some of the life lessons I learned along my travels as a volunteer around the world. And anything that was relatable from my childhood or from later on in my life, the decisions I had to make to overcome certain adversities. And if they were relatable, I wanted to share that if it was helpful to anybody else. And what I did then was use my story to kind of expose those. I kind of say it's like Following Such is almost like a clothesline. The book itself is like a clothesline. And each chapter is like a shirt, a pair of shorts, a pair of trousers hanging on there. And I'm using that as a way to help somebody in different aspects of their lives, let's say.
Right. I mean, it's so relatable. It is so incredibly relatable. Things like the way you met your husband and your family's reaction and his friend's reaction. I mean, who does that?
I know,
Who
right?
does that, Niamh? I mean, really, your poor family, like, oh my gosh.
so so to explain what happened, I had been working on the tiny island of Sark in the UK Channel Islands, just off the coast of France, and I was managing hotels there. And at the end of 2014, the owners decided they were going to close the hotels for the year of 2015. So I decided, I'd been working 16 hours a day in hospitality, and it was like full on all the time. And I'm going to take some time now. And I managed to save some money. But I always wanted to travel as a volunteer. I had done a number of different volunteer travel programs throughout the years I'd been traveling. And I said, okay, I'm going to do a whole year. And my goal is to circumnavigate. So not by boat, but by plane, obviously. And I found a website that was connecting hosts and volunteers. And the idea was you would work 5 hours a day, 5 days a week in exchange for food and lodging. Because like I wasn't a trust fund baby by any manner of means, and I had saved enough money for the airfares, but at least I'd be fed, I'd be housed, and I could get to live in communities and donate my time and help and everything. And I had done a whole year of that. It was amazing, through St. Bart's, the Caribbean, down through all the different islands in South Pacific, up through Micronesia, Palau, and through Asia and back to London at the time. And I said, okay, I'd finished this sort of circumnavigation. I had done 12 months. I thought, okay, what's next? And I thought I should probably, settle down, go back to work. And while I was sending out resumes both in the States and also in Europe, I kept looking at this website, and I found this one other project, which was to volunteer crew for a solo sailor to bring his boat from Florida to the Bahamas. And it was only supposed to last 1 month. Well, when I told people I was going to go on a sailboat with a man I'd never met, my family immediately said, how do you know he's not an axe murderer? And at the same time, I didn't know it later that his friends were saying to him, this is a woman you've never even met. You don't know anything about her. How do you know she isn't a modern day pirate who's going to confiscate your boat, dump you overboard when you're 12 miles offshore? So one of the things I've learned from traveling, especially as a solo female for many years, is to listen to your intuition. If you allow somebody else's fears for you infect you, you'll start to live a smaller life, and you've got to trust that your intuition will guide you. And yes, there are certain situations that you don't want to get into. You have to be careful. You have to be vigilant. But if you approach it with the mindset that my intuition will carry me through, and it's been very useful for me. I said, I'm going to try this. First of all, I'm going to meet him on land. The boat's still at the marina. I will get a read on him pretty quickly. I'll get a vibe. And if something's off, I'll be like, see ya. And so I met him, and we started to sail. And the first trip was, like I said, from the east coast of Florida over to the Bahamas. And it was across the Gulf Stream, which is the underwater river that runs from south to north up along the east coast of America. And it can be quite treacherous if you get any north component in the wind and the current coming from the south. The two can collide and give you standing waves. So it can be a bit rough. And it was rough the day we went over. And the engine quit. And we realized that we approach things very differently. I put on my old TV director hat, if you like, and I was like, okay, the sun's going down. We can't get in without an engine into the marina. The people who can tow you back are back in Florida. We need to turn this boat around. And Gary's looking at me like, who made you captain? Right? We only knew each other a week at that point. And he went through all sorts of things. He changed filters, and it worked for a little bit, and then it cocked out again. And then finally he turns around and says, yeah, I think we should turn around. And I was like, we both came to the same decision, but we had to go through our own type of process to get to that decision. And that was something we learned from very early on. And then we came back ashore into Florida, and we got the boat repaired. And he looked at me that morning and he said to me, you're not coming back, are you? And my face is not my friend, right? You could read it all over my face. It's like, oh I'm not. Because, like, what happens? I didn't know enough about sailing. I said, what if anything happens to us when we're out there? Anything happens to you? I won't know what to do. I mean, that doesn't feel this again, intuition, that doesn't feel very good. And anyway, so we made that decision and I had to rethink it. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And do you know what? If I hadn't have gone through that process and realized I'm going to give it a go, I would not have met the most perfect, no, he's not perfect actually, amazing human being. And been in, talk about an epic life. Like now I am living the just embodiment of everything I ever wanted. I got to work at sea. I got to meet the most beautiful human being. And he at the time was out of a long-term marriage and he didn't want any kind of a relationship. And I wasn't looking for anybody either. But because you're living 24/7 in a 40-foot space, and after the work of the day, haul that line up, or make the dinner on the galley, all that kind of stuff. In the evening, we just talked, and we got to know each other from the inside out. We were such profound conversations that we suddenly this bond developed, then a friendship, and then kind of this little spark. And after 4 months, we brought the boat back to Florida, and he went back to California to be with his family, and I was heading to Ireland for a reunion. And we basically said goodbye to each other. Because I had learned that at that point, yes, I had a lot of feelings for him, but he was allergic to pecans and relationships. So at that point, we said goodbye, and I thought, it doesn't matter. He was such a huge influence on me in terms of how I approach life, how I overcome things, and taught me stuff of how to deal with some of the stuff from my past childhood. And I thought I am a better person just from having known him. And do you know, once I got through that mental process of rethinking, instead of being all boo-hoo, I was like, just be grateful for what it was and what it is. And that's a huge part of your life and you're better for it. The next 10 minutes, the phone rings and he says, do you want to sail up the east coast of America with me? So I said, well, where are we going? And he goes, New Jersey. I said, what's in New Jersey? He goes, Newark. And there's a nonstop flight to Dublin. And that's how he ended up coming to meet my family in Dublin.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then, so he met them and then we came back and he said, well, do you want to get the boats in New Jersey? Do you want to fly back to New Jersey and we'll sail her back down to Florida? So I said, well, I got nothing else going on right now. And in the middle of all of that, I had shown him one of my short stories from years ago. And he said, Niamh, you've got to do this full time. This is your calling. You've done all these other, various careers, but this is your true calling. And I said, yeah, I know, but I've never been able to be in that position to just, down tools and do it full time. And he said, now's your chance. And that's when I started writing full time. So that was 8 years ago. And spool forward to 2019, Thanksgiving, we're in the little island of Beckway in the St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And as the sun's going down, he brings out the champagne for Thanksgiving and out comes the engagement ring and the proposal. It was like, just melt your heart. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Oh, hon. You still are that blushing bride.
We were totally newlyweds. We have a lot of friends here in Florida who've been married like 40 years, 45 years, 50 years. We'll all be in a group of friends and then suddenly Gary and I might be holding hands or be looking at each other and go, oh my God, you newlyweds make us sick, We're 8 years together now, 8.5 years. I can't even believe it. It was supposed to be 1 month. You keep saying, you were only supposed to stay a month.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what is life like today? What are you doing? I know you're writing books. I get that.
Sure. Well, earlier or the back end of last year, after we'd done all the tours with Flares Up, the first book, I said this year, I said, look, I need to work half-time. Like I said, we weren't expecting to have this relationship. We would never have picked each other out of normal circumstances. There's a 14-year age gap between us. The chances are statistically that he's going to pass before I do. And I suddenly thought, I don't want to stay locked in a room for a year writing a book and then open the door and say, oh, where are you, Gary? So I said, I want to spend more time with you. So instead of my working half time, now we're both working full time. He's now the business manager for my brand, which is The Rider on the Water. And we both work full time. But then we found this beautiful situation. Now we're based on southwest coast of Florida. We're on a canal system. So we've got a new little boat and a dock so we can go run around for lunchtime, out into Charlotte Harbour. But we're also now guest speakers for celebrity cruise lines. And so we're on stage together. We're telling stories. We're telling, how to live a meaningful life, how to use volunteer travel for personal growth. We have another talk that we do, which is, what's it really like to live on a sailboat? Because, people have this idea, you get a sailboat and you sail off into the sunset. Well, yeah, guess what? The sun comes up and it could be a very rough night the night before. So we do a lot of talks like that. And that has really gelled things for us to still be on the water, but there's a different captain has to worry about the weather. There's somebody else. I'm not the galley slave. There's somebody else making our meals. There's somebody coming in and changing our linens and everything. We love it.
Oh my gosh, that is such a cool gig.
Isn't it?
Who would have ever thought that you could get a permanent gig on a cruise line?
Well, our next one is in November. We're going to be on the ship of the Constellation, which is the Celebrity Constellation. We're going to be on that for a month almost. We start in Barcelona for repositioning, so it's a transatlantic. And then we end up in Tampa, and then there's another Caribbean back-to-back with that. So we'll be on for about a month. And the beauty of that is one of the things I have done prior is you talked about everybody has a story to tell, which I 100% believe. So I've been running writers' workshops and encouraging people to tell their story, whether it's just for their own grandchildren, their own family, their legacy, or whether it's for, a broader audience. Everybody, I believe, has a book in them, and everybody can write their story. And even if it seems like it's the same story, each person has a unique filter on how they view the world and how they experience maybe the same things, And so that's one of the things. So one of the things I'm hoping on the transatlantic is a lot more sea days that we'll be able to help some people with, the writing. I do one on Unleash the Writer Within You and show you how to go about it, that kind of idea.
Huh. That's just mind-boggling. I've only been on one cruise. It was a Hawaiian cruise 20 years ago. But the thought of going on a cruise and getting to hear a really great speaker and learn things and grow, wow, that's cool.
Well, it's interesting because what Celebrity has done particularly is they've developed this series called Beyond the Podium. So they have guest speakers who will come on about the destinations. Like tomorrow we're going to be in St. Lucia and this is what to expect. On the Alaska and the Galapagos kind of ones where they'll have naturalists who will say this is the fauna and flora, all that kind of stuff. And then we just did one with them. We were talking on one, which is the Panama Canal cruise, which I was thrilled to be asked to go on because we loved that experience. But there was a gentleman on giving talks about the building of the canal because his father worked on the building of the canal. He grew up in Panama. That was very interesting. And there was an astrologist on talking all about stars, and he had his telescope on the boat. It was amazing. So, and then you have sports personalities, and there's some really interesting talks.
Oh gosh, yeah, sounds like a wonderful addition to a vacation.
Yeah.
Whew, oh my goodness, you are fascinating. I mean, really, there's never a dull moment. You've just got so much going on. So let me ask you this. Practicality, right? For our listeners, what are some things that they can do to live a more epic life? Basic stuff.
Okay, so for me, and to share with people, I think the first thing you have to do is tap into what is your passion. And the way I suggest people do that is you're lying in bed in the morning, all your bills are paid, all your family's taken care of, the meals are all set, ready to go. And you're living in this luxury and somebody comes in and opens the curtains and they say, oh, hi, how was it this morning? What would you like to do today? And the first thought that pops into your mind is something that you're passionate about. And then I tell people, okay, so now you know what you're passionate about. What is it something that if you're, working age, is that something you can earn money doing? And if it is, take the next baby step to make that your job or your career, your profession, or whatever that is. If it's not, then it's your hobby. And that's okay too. have that passion, know what you want to do with it. Okay. And then, you earn your living however you're doing it. So to me, it's always stop and think, what are you passionate about? And I think the older we get, the more we are like, there's probably, for me anyway, there's more life behind me than probably in front of me at this point. I am quicker to cut away stuff that doesn't work for me anymore. Whether that's something to be doing, and unfortunately, sometimes it can be in friendships or relationships that are pulling you down. I think there's always, when two people meet, in my opinion, there's always a sale made. And either Mr. Happy will drag Mr. Grumpy up to his level, or Mr. Grumpy will drag Mr. Happy down to his. I used men, actually. I don't know why I picked on men that analogy, but anyway. So I think you got to surround yourself with people who are either where you want to be, leaders, mentors, and truly listen to your own gut and try and banish the inner critic, because that's something, certainly as a writer, we've got one of those sitting on our shoulder every day. You sit down to write, like, every first draft of everything is always terrible. It's a craft. You have to learn the craft of improving it. But from a practical point of view, I would say living in the moment, in the present, and that involves not reaching too far into the forward, because I think that's where anxiety lives. It certainly lives there for me in terms of, what if this happened? What if I do this? What if I don't do that? And that takes me out of the present moment, and that gets me into that niggle of fear coming out the back of my neck, right? I have one story that I tell about going on a skydive. And I had jumped out of airplanes as on a static line as a parachute before, where, you come to the end of 3 seconds and the parachute line is attached to the airplane and it automatically brakes and, your parachute's open. So that's, I didn't have to do much.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
You didn't have to do much.
Well,
you jumped out of a freaking plane.
There was that when they stole the engine to allow you, because the propellers are not working anymore. They stole the engine. Yes, you do actually have to physically jump out. So there is that. But I think some people actually, if you didn't jump out, they'd actually kick you out. But anyway, so years later, I decided I wanted to know what it was to free fall, and I thought I ended up doing a tandem dive where there was somebody behind me, strapped. I was strapped to their. They were strapped on my back. That's right. Anyway, so I had read Eckhart Tolle's book about a new earth, about living in the moment, literally living in this second. Right now, the only seconds I have in my life is sitting here talking with you, right? That's all you and I have.
That's right.
So I thought, if we stayed there, there's nothing fearful about right now. We're sitting here. I'm in a comfortable chair. I can see you. I can talk to you. So nothing to be scared about. So I decided to apply that practice to this skydive. Get to the hangar and they say, okay, you're getting the green jumpsuit. And I'm like, okay. So I go over and start putting on the green jumpsuit. Now that's normally when you start to go, oh my God, I'm going to jump out of a plane. Oh my God, am I going to hurt myself? Or what's going to happen? But if you stay in that physical moment, you say to yourself, I am putting on a green jumpsuit. That's not too difficult. I have put on my clothes before. Nothing to be scared about, right? Next step was, okay, guys, time to go. And we start walking out on the tarmac towards the airplane. Well, I've walked in small airports out on the tarmac to an airplane. I'm getting on a plane, done that before. Slight difference, this one doesn't have a door. But anyway, and now we're taking off and we're in the air. I've been in an airplane before. And then there's the moment where it's like you're in the door and it's time to jump. Well, this time I had a big burly guy behind me, so we were jumping no matter what, right? But then you're in the middle of the air and there's a 40 seconds before the parachute is pulled. So you're literally falling through the air. You're not going to bump into anything up there, are you? Right? There's nothing really to be scared about in that 40 seconds. The real fear or moment is when you connect with land again, when you hit the earth again, and you're hoping that it's going to be a nice landing. But that's the only instant, and that will last an instant. It'll be over an instant, and it'll either be great or it won't. Right? So that's, for me, when we get stuck, I think we get paralyzed in fear. Like, like me and going to my dad, should I take the director's course or should I go and get married? Oh, well, I don't have a husband looking for me at the moment. So, okay, maybe I should do this. So we can get stuck if we don't stay in the moment and make our choices.
You know what, my dear, that riff of you doing that is going to stick with me for the rest of my life.
Oh, see, that's the whole reason for writing books. That actually isn't even in the book, but that's it. If you can impact one other person, and you're impacting tons of people in what you're doing, and we all have that. We all have that ability, and sometimes we don't even know it, but we all have that ability to help somebody else on this earth, I think.
And that's what we're here for, right? That when there's so much scarcity right now. I mean, the time that we're recording this is 2024, the end of August in 2024. And the world is not the same place it was before COVID. It never will be. It will never go back to that. And there's so much, I've got to watch out for me. I've got to take care of me. I've got to get mine. And the truth is, until you can give, until you can serve, you can't get enough for you. That's the real gift is, well, as I'm talking to you, well, come on. So let's just run through highlight some of the things that you have done for others throughout your life.
Well, you just hit on one on serve. How do we serve somebody else? And I had a very meaningful Oprah aha moment. And that was in Palau, which is a very small island in Micronesia. And I had come to help, one of my volunteer projects was to help at a hostel. And part of my job was very glamorous. I was cleaning up the kitchen, I was cleaning bathrooms, I was changing linens, it was very basic stuff. And there was one guy came in one day, he didn't speak English and he didn't make any effort to communicate whatsoever. And he made like in a hostel, you make your own meals and then you clean up after yourself. Well, this guy didn't. He left all the dirty dishes in the sink and I was about ready to be done for the day. It was my time off. And I was like, grumpy about it. I'm like, what is this guy? What doesn't, first of all, he doesn't even say hello or nod or, acknowledge me. And then, he's supposed to wash up his own dishes. So then I thought, well, I'll have to do it anyway. So I did it. I was so grumpy about it. And then I stormed off down by the water, which always calms me down. I was like, what does he think? I am this, I am that. I've been a TV director. I've been a hotel manager. I've been this. And he just thinks I'm like just some servant, like running around after him. And then I made the huge discovery on the word just that, I was thinking, he needs to know I'm not just a cleaner. And then I realized that is so judgmental on my part because there are people who work in the industry. If we didn't have people working in the industry of sanitation, for starters, like in the hospitals, in the restaurants, the world would fall apart. We'd all be sick and dying. And that's a career for other people. It's a different career from the path I've been on, but they are in service. And then I suddenly woke up the next morning and went, actually, it doesn't matter what job we do. It doesn't matter who we're married to or not married or single or child, brother, sister. We're actually all in service for each other. And I started to play a game with myself the next morning. And I was babysitting the owner's children and we were watching television. I was like, oh, well, actually, what am I doing when I'm watching television with this kid, watching cartoons? I am serving the mother by giving her time to work at her desk and answer reservations for her business. And then the old guy comes down and doesn't wash his dishes again. What am I doing? Actually, I'm giving him an extra 10 minutes on his vacation where he can leave the hostel and go out and see Palau. And it was a real eye-opener for me in terms of how we view other people. And in actual fact, it's one big circle of service. It doesn't have to be the service industry per se, but we really are all in service for each other. And I think that once we start reaching out like that and helping other people and what can I do for you, it's amazing what the universe brings back to you.
It is. And this, it's not a riddle, but Niamh, there was this thing that was said that somebody went to hell and was checking out hell. And there was this feast, a huge feast, and there was so much food and everything was wonderful. But everybody was starving to death because once they died, they got these really long arms and they couldn't get the food to their mouth. And so they couldn't eat, but they had to smell it and be around it. And then the guy went to heaven and he saw the same thing in heaven. The only difference was everybody was eating because they were all feeding each other.
Ah, lovely.
And it's if we could just figure that out, this world would be a much better place. If we could be more like dogs
So yeah, absolute unconditional love, no matter what.
Yes, yes. The whole body wags and you know, yeah, it's wonderful.
There's another story like that where the guy comes down through the hills and there's a gatekeeper guy sitting on a chair at the edge of the town. I don't know if you've heard this one. And he goes in, he says to him, what are the people like in this town? And the wise person sitting on the chair goes, well, what were the people like in your last town? He says, oh, they were amazing. They were so helpful. They were just, wonderful people to be with. And he says, so you will find it in this town. Versus he comes down the hill and the guy says, well, how did you find it in your last town? He goes, oh, they were miserable. They were all on their own. They're this, that, and the other. And he goes, so will you find it in this town? Right? So it's how we show up. Yeah.
Right. It Pete, when we would deny this before whatever enlightenment came after all the, but we would deny it at that point. No, you're nuts. What are you talking about? But it is so true. Oh my gosh, I think we could do this for hours. I try to keep pace. We've already gone way over, but what pieces of advice do you have for our folks?
2 things. Never put off a dream. And actually the name of the boat in Flares Up is actually Dream It, Do It. But I would say when you get that little instinct, that intuition, somebody pops into your head that you haven't thought about for a while, pick up the phone. That's a message. You don't act on it. And just listen to your gut.
I love it. And I love you. I love your book. Guys, get the book. You won't be able to put it down. It is just what a fascinating life this lady has led. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
You got it. Thank you.